So we just got one of the craziest World of Warcraft reveals at day one of BlizzCon, this being the Worldsoul Saga. And this is a group of 3 different World of Warcraft expansions that are all gonna have stories tied into each other and continued from expansion to expansion. So the next upcoming expansion, the 10th expansion for retail, is gonna be World of Warcraft, The War Within. Then the 11th expansion is gonna be World of Warcraft Midnight. Then the 12th expansion is gonna be World of Warcraft The Last Titan. And this is a pretty massive deal because this is a massive change in how they're telling the entirety of World of Warcraft's story. So previously you would have an expansion and the entirety of that expansion story was basically kept within that expansion. There wouldn't be much continuity from expansion to expansion. You would finish an expansion, the next expansion would be something completely different. But with this Worldsoul Saga, this is one overarching story that's being weaved between these 3 different expansions. And I think this has the potential to be one of the best changes to Warcraft's story since the original RTS games, because this is going to allow the storytellers working on WoW to tell a much more cohesive story that's going to last probably close to 6 years, maybe a little bit sooner, because it does also sound like they want these expansions to come a bit quicker than normal, but probably 5 to 6 years of story is being laid out in this one reveal. So that brings us to the expansion up next, which is the War Within, that actually has some pretty interesting new systems. And we're going to be getting a lot of the similar content we would be getting from basically any other expansion. We're getting 4 new zones that all look really incredible in my opinion, 3 of them being completely or almost completely underground. So it's really interesting how these new zones are being laid out. We're getting 8 new dungeons, 1 new 8 boss raid, but the most interesting part about this expansion is the new systems we're getting. Starting off with delves. Deep beneath the surface lies treasure vaults waiting to be discovered. Explore these world instances solo or with up to 4 friends, along with an NPC companion, to defeat bosses and gain epic endgame loot. And these delves are being described as a new pillar of the endgame. And a big piece of that is that these delves are being added into the Great Vault. So you can go do these delves, you'll be able to get gear from the Great Vault to go open every week with the PvPers, the Mythic Plusers, and the Raiders. And this is being more designed as kind of the end game pillar for the open world. So this is probably going to be a bit easier than high Mythic Plus or high rating or rated PvP, but it's also going to be able to be done completely solo. So I think the vast majority of players are probably going to take part in this in some fashion. And like mentioned, you'll be able to do the solo or with up to a full group of 5, and it'll scale depending on how many players are in it. You'll also be having a companion accompany you on these delves, and for season 1 that's going to be Hemet Nessingberry, and he's also going to have his own talent tree that you'll be able to put points in to help you with whatever you need in these dungeons. They mentioned that maybe you need some healing, you'll be able to talent into some healing so he can help heal you if you need that. You can spec him into being a tank or a DPS to help shore up your weak points if you're, say, doing solo delves. And for season 1 there's going to be 13 delves, and it sounds like there's going to be new delves for new seasons, and you're also going to get a new NPC that follows you into these delves with every season as well. So season 1 is going to be Hemet Nessingberry. Season 2, it'll be someone else that'll probably have another different skill tree as well. So this isn't just going to be something that's added at the start of the expansion and then nothing happens with it. It's going to be pretty different every new season, which allows it to be that end game pillar. And they did also mention you're able to farm up end game loot through this system. As I mentioned, it's going to be added to the Great Vault, so you'll be able to get gear that way. And then just doing this, you'll be able to get endgame gear. Now, I'm not sure how good of endgame gear. Presumably, it's not going to be like Mythic Raid gear or Mythic Plus 20 gear or anything like that, but it's probably going to be more substantial than you were able to get in open world content previous to delves. So this is actually incredibly massive for solo players because they're accomplishing a goal of adding an endgame pillar specifically for solo players. And now you can do this with a group still, but you'll be able to do this completely solo. So in my opinion, this is a pretty big win as a first new system for this expansion. And the next new system is something that players have wanted for so long, and these are called Warbands, and these are an account-wide alt system. So expand the potential of your alt with account-wide progression across your family of characters on your Battle.net account. And this is regardless of their faction. Share Warband bank access, renown in the War Within expansion, achievements, collections, and more. So this is basically a system of tying all of your characters into one account-wide progression system. Now there's a few pieces of information that we don't know if it's going to be included in Warbands because they have not specifically said if old reputation will be tied into this or not. They did specifically mention that the renown for the War Within expansion and any new expansion is going to be tied into this. So you get renown 20 on one character, all your characters have renown 20 in the new expansion, but we don't know if old reputations are going to be tied into this, but presumably if they're not, they will be added at some point. And the overarching idea of the system is that it turns basically any progression into account-wide progression except for gearing or leveling. Basically everything else should be added into these warbands and will just allow you to progress the entirety of your account. And this includes things like transmog. So you could go on one character now and unlock basically every transmog item in the game. If you're playing on a warrior in the new expansion and you go run a dungeon, if you pick up a piece of cloth gear, you'll earn that transmog that then you can go use on your cloth character. And things like shared bank access is pretty interesting. You share achievements, and there'll probably be more systems added into this, but I think this is one of the biggest quality of life additions we've gotten to World of Warcraft in quite a long time. This is massive, especially for players that do a lot of different pieces of content throughout WoW. This is just massive for them, especially for collectors. And then next up, we have hero talents. So rise to the new heights of power with new hero talent trees. Each class specialization has access to 2 choices of self-contained hero talent trees inspired by iconic Warcraft universe archetypes. And what's actually shown with this is a druid choosing between Keeper of the Grove and a Loon's Chosen. And what these new hero talents are going to be is there's going to be a new small section in your talent trees that gives you basically a third smaller talent tree that you get one of 2 choices of different hero talent trees to spec into that are going to give you a bunch of different options. And these are going to have all the same rules as your normal talent trees. You can spec out of them whenever you want outside of combat, and you're going to be getting 10 total points to spend in these, so leveling up from 70 up to 80 with the new expansion. And these are going to add new modifiers that are kind of themed around whatever talent tree you take. Now what's interesting is most classes are going to have 3 different options, and every spec is going to be able to choose between 2 of those options. So they gave the example of a warrior. You have protection, fury, and arms. Protection is able to choose between Mountain Thane or Colossus. Fury is able to choose between Mountain Thane or Slayer, and arms is able to choose between Slayer and Colossus. And these hero talent trees are also going to modify a bunch of existing skills that are not only going to add new combat effects, but they're also going to add in new animations, new VFX. And they did show some gameplay of a warrior with the Mountain Thane hero talents. And some of the changes they showed is that when they jumped in and thunderclapped, it had different animations. It was more lightning based, and then their Stormbolt hit 3 targets instead of 1. So these are just 2 different options, and you're obviously going to have a ton of different options because you have 10 points. You have multiple trees you can choose between, and it seems like these are just further pushing you into a class archetype. And it does also seem like this is going to be a very good area to add in a bit more support options with pre-existing specs. I would be very surprised if we didn't see a bunch of healers and even some other classes get some more support options when choosing their hero talents. And this is definitely one of the things I'm most excited for. I've loved the new Dragonfly talent trees, and adding more on top of those talent trees is just super exciting, gives a lot more options, and just gives you more ways to customize whatever build you're using. And since we have new things like delves that you could potentially do by yourself as new endgame content, that even gives you more possible builds to go build for. Because usually when you're doing endgame content, you're building for PvP, Mythic Plus, or raiding. You're usually not building a solo spec. Now that we have a more solo endgame system, you might want to build a spec that's completely based on being solo. So there's going to be a ton of new build options. And then some of the smaller things, we're getting a new allied race, the Earthern Dwarfs, which are going to be for both Horde and Alliance. They're going to have a bunch of different customizable options. I actually really like the look of these guys. You can get like a bunch of crystal spikes sticking out of them. I think they look really cool. I know some people have been saying that it's just being lazy and reusing dwarfs, but I think they're really cool. I'll definitely probably make one. We're getting dynamic flying, which I think it makes a lot of sense that they renamed this from dragon flying, because there's now going to be hundreds of mounts you can use use as dynamic flying. You'll be able to use griffins. They shut off the ashes of Alar. So there's going to be a ton of new mounts you get to use with the dragon riding system. And it's also really cool that they're doing this, and we're also going to get this at the start of the expansion because of how they created the new zones in the expansion. You start above ground in the first zone, then all the other zones are underground, but they go deeper and deeper underground. So you'll actually be able to fly from the surface all the way through all of the zones. It keeps sending you deeper and deeper underground as you go through all of these zones. So that's just going to be super cool for dragon riding through all of the different zones. But that's a top-down look at a lot of the new content, new systems, and new information we have for the upcoming World of Warcraft expansions. And there is going to be another panel at day 2 of Blizzcon, so there's going to be a ton of new information I'm going to go over after that as well. But overall, I'm very excited. I like a lot of the stuff I'm seeing. I love the look of all the new zones. The new systems seem pretty interesting to me, and I'm actually a really big fan of them laying out multiple expansions of stories, building in this saga, and having a much bigger emphasis on telling a connected story. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.